more than any other horror genre or franchise, it's like we really some put ourselves into that character, the monster character, than we do with the humans.
Hey there, folks. In today's segment, I speak to a super awesome horror fan and content creator, Brian Rodriguez, of the wonderful Instagram account UniMonsters. Find out how this soft spoken and unassuming horror enthusiast turned his love for the universal monsters into not only an Instagram sensation, but also a special place for monster fans like myself and you to share our affection for these timeless characters. And that's not all. Brian and I also explore the allure of the universal monster era. What is it about these classic creatures that hypnotizes us nearly 100 years after their spawning? We'll also uncover the humble beginnings of Brian's passion project, UniMonsters. And before we jump in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This is just one episode of my Universal Monsters chat with Brian. It's also a little way I feel I can share my passion for horror and the Universal Monsters with you, and also chat to another one of horror's unsung heroes. So stick around for more stories from the Den. Let's keep the legends alive. Lo and behold, the prodigal son returns. Really, congratulations also on your successful Instagram page. It's wonderful to see that you've created a space for so many people to go and get, their little fix of the universal horror monsters.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. It's a great way to, I think, preach the word of the universal monsters to people who may have not been exposed to them yet.
Yeah, exactly. And well, let's start with your Instagram page for a moment. And excuse me for sounding presumptuous here. I mean, you're this young guy, and I just got to ask you, and I'm probably generalizing a little bit, yeah, because
For sure.
you expect that young guys are going to be into certain things, but here you are, you're into these old horror movies that were probably quite possibly made even before my grandfather was born. So I just got to ask you, what inspires you to dedicate an entire Instagram page to the universal monsters?
I think that's probably the biggest reaction I get when I tell people I have this page. It's like, or especially when they find out my age, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, you're how old and you like this stuff? Like, so like you said, your grandfather wasn't even born yet and these movies were coming out. But when I was younger, in like elementary school, this was in like the early 2000s, um I started to see the movies on TV, like on AMC. So I got exposed to them through, like, the rebroadcastings on, like, they had like a Halloween AMC horror event. And my elementary school still had these books that I believe came out in like the 70s or 80s, the Crestwood House books, or the orange books that had the Universal Monsters on them. And I was like such a huge fan of like these characters that I checked out all the books, and I was like, okay, let's go start a monster club. Like, that was just something in my mind. I was like, I'm gonna start reading these books off to a bunch of kids and they're gonna love it. They're gonna get into monsters like I did. And I invited some friends, didn't pan out, no one showed up. I was just like, oh, bummer. But I was just like, you know what? Maybe it's just my thing. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just the weird kid that loves monsters. But along with seeing the movies on TV, I also went to Universal Studios in Hollywood, which was always closer to my home. So I got some exposure from there as well. But then years and years passed by, and again, I hold these characters very close to me, and I don't really share them out too much. And then I just decided, well, I'm gonna start some social media pages. So I believe I started on Instagram first in 2014, or on Twitter, and then I moved to Instagram about early 2016, late 2015. And then the response I got on there was like, it built, but it was pretty fascinating to see how many people were also into the stuff. And I think that's when I finally was like, okay, I'm not the only one out there.
So your little club grew into a seriously big club, you know?
Yes.
What has the response been like on your Instagram page?
Yeah, so when I started it, like I said, it was like I realized there's more people out there, but it was a very slow burn kind of thing because again, I started in 2016 and it went on for 3 or 4 years, and it had a sizable, following and got a decent amount of likes, comments, and chatted with some people. But not until I noticed that in 2020, like probably post pandemic, when we were already in the wave of that, I noticed more interaction. That's when the page really kind of like took off. So I think people were looking for more communities in that time of the stuff they really liked, or maybe during the pandemic, people had more time to watch movies and they decided to pop on like a classic Universal monster movie and they got really hooked. I'm not sure what it was, but it really started growing within the last 3 to 4 years, I think.
You spoke a few moments ago about these characters that you hold so dear to your heart, and I totally relate to that. And I'm sure that you can see on your Instagram page a lot of other people relate to exactly that. But what is it that you think it is that resonates with people about the Universal monsters? Like, what is it about that period that still to this day fascinates us about these films?
When we were speaking on engagement and the how the page has grown, there's two characters that really stood out when I noticed like the page was getting like a lot of likes or a post would get a lot of likes. It was always the creature and the Bride of Frankenstein. And I always, in relation to your question, I think it was like we like these characters because with the Bride of Frankenstein, specifically that movie, how we feel for the monsters. Like that was the key thing for Universal Monsters. It was always we can sympathize with them. Sometimes we're scared of them. They're kind of, creepy, like even like the creature from the Black Lagoon. But we kind of feel for them. Like they didn't ask to be experimented on, to be born, to be hated. So it's like I think we resonate with those monsters. We feel like them. So it is the sympathy for me, like more than any other horror, like than the slashers, than paranormal activity movies. Like it's just a different kind of thing that I don't think ever has ever been like closely recreated.
Yeah, there's something about like I mean, as wonderful as like you were talking about the slasher genre, as wonderful as it is, and as wonderful as all the different eras of horror, all of them have their own thing. But you mentioned something really I think poignant about the golden age of horror and the Universal monsters is that they are almost monsters that don't want to be monsters, and
Yes.
it's kind of like being an outcast almost. You don't really want to be an outcast. It's like you were saying you were looking for a little club where people
Yeah.
could share with you, and it's kind of like there's a connect between that and the Universal monsters, I think.
Yeah, it definitely it's something where we put our shoes in the characters, like the villains, where it's like you can't really, or the villains, but because they do some questionable things, but in more than any other horror genre or franchise, it's like we really some put ourselves into that character, the monster character, than we do with the humans.
Gaze into the abyss.